Hi, Clate. It's an honor to have you on my show, Moments with Masters. Clate, love you.
Great to be with you. Thanks for your flexibility. Sorry it took us a while to get together.
Yeah, thank you so much, Clate. Before we get into the conversation, I would like to introduce you to my Indian audience. And yeah, our special guest for the day on this show, Moments with Masters, is Clate Mask. And Clate Mask is a founder and CEO of KEAP, formerly known as Infusionsoft. Clate has been educating and inspiring entrepreneurs for over a decade and is recognized by the small business community as a visionary leader. His passion for small business success stems from his personal experience taking Infusionsoft from a struggling startup to an 8-time Inc. 500 winner. As CEO, Clate is leading Infusionsoft on its mission to simplify growth for millions of small businesses worldwide. Under Clade's leadership, KEAP, formerly known as Infusionsoft, has landed 4 rounds of venture capital, including $55 million Series D, led by Bain Capital Ventures, with contributions from prior investors, Signal Peak Ventures, and Goldman Sachs. He was named an Ernst and Young Entrepreneur of the Year finalist, a top 100 small business influencer by Small Business Trends, one of the 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs of 2013 by Goldman Sachs, and Business Leader of the Year by Arizona Technology Council. Clate is a national speaker on entrepreneurship and small business success and co-author of the New York Times bestseller Conquer the Chaos: How to Grow a Successful Small Business Without Going Crazy. And Clate, I'm sure we are going to have a lot of crazy things to understand and know from you in this next 1 hour of conversation. But my first question to you, Clate, how you have been traveling in this being centered life for about what, 13 years?
Yes, that's right.
And when was the first time you woke up to this fact that there is something called a being centered life? And how did it happen?
Yeah. Well, I started working with Steve Hardison, and that was about 13 years ago. And it wasn't long before I started to recognize what it meant to be living a being centered life, even though we didn't call it that back then. It was, Steve would always help me see how I was showing up in the world, how I was, what the place I was coming from, as he would describe it. Um, and it started to become a very common way of discussion for me and Steve to talk about different things that were happening in my life and relate it back to who I was being. And so, of course, when you work with Steve, one of the first things is you begin creating your I am statements. You begin to get clear for yourself on who you are for the world. And so it was probably within just, a few weeks of working with Steve that I began to really practice being, who I intended to be for the world.
Clint, how did you find when you started working on how you show up, where you come from? And
Yeah.
then with this understanding, when you go back to your business, when you think in terms of money, when you think in terms of wealth, when you think in terms of people management, how did that transition go, or what was your experience like?
Yeah. Um, it I guess I'm a slow learner because it took a while. And I would say I'm still doing it. I'm still
Mm,
working on who I'm being every day. But I think that what happened was I began to recognize what it is to be my word. And I began to really recognize um, where the place that I'm coming from as I interact with people. And so then it became very natural in my interactions with my team members at work and with all of our employees to intentionally show up a certain way. And, like I said, I'm still working on that every day. I don't feel like I've arrived at that. I'm trying to be my best self and be who I feel like the world needs me to be and who I want to be. I'm working on that every day. So what I would say is that as I worked on the principles with Steve, and then I began to live those principles in my work life, it was just practice to be around people, and with each interaction is an opportunity to ref- afterward to reflect and say, okay, how was I showing up in that interaction? And especially if it didn't go well, to then say, okay, well, what was I bringing? What were my thoughts, and where was I coming from in that conversation that resulted in a less desirable outcome than I would have wanted?
Clate, okay. So I would want to ask you, how was your experience? How did you see any change in how business world perceived you when you started making these changes in who you're being? I mean, your employees listening to you and your growing number of employees, and then how would you train them? How would you make them understand? It's very rare that even CEOs or business leaders talk about transformation or coming from a being centered leadership. So it's like, people want to have business coaches, people want to have some other coaches, but if as a leader you are being coached by someone like Steve Hardison, and then you go back to your business, then you have your collaborations with other business leaders. How was this all shifting around you when you started
Yeah,
showing up in this way?
yeah, that's a really great point. As I started to operate a little differently, my team members noticed it, and a couple of my team members wanted to learn more and understand it better, and so they began coaching with Steve. And and then there were a couple of others who coached, who kind of they were seeing it as well, and they wanted to do some coaching as well. So I think the first thing was, when you show up in the world and in a declarative way and a very intentional way, people who are close to you, they notice it, and they start to ask questions about, well, what's he doing? Why is, what's what's he eating for breakfast? I want to eat that too. So I had team members who noticed it and wanted to participate in coaching, and they did. And so I'd say that's one thing. The other thing, though, I would say was, our business results became much more forward looking. So a lot of times in business, the natural tendency is to look back and say, well, we did A, B, and C, and that naturally leads to D, so we're going to do D now. And in particular, in terms of goals and accomplishments, we did this 2 years ago and this last year, so this year we can do this. And what I found was, as I worked on who I was being for the world, it opened up more space for my team to think in a forward way about growth and about what we were creating. And it put people into a more creative space. And I think that is probably the most powerful part of the business impact of being centered leadership. If you look at in terms of the business results, if you're just looking at business results, and I don't think of being centered leadership as just business results, but if you are sitting there as a CFO or a financial number cruncher and you're saying, why should we invest in this being centered leadership? Well, you need to say, well, what's the ROI? Well, the return on investment is that a company, a business, will create something in the future that's not tethered by the past. That's not tied to what did we do in the past, therefore this is what we can now do in the future. Instead, we're looking at who we're being in the world and what's possible. And as Steve calls it, we live in the generative world instead of the declarative world. So you can say you can declare what was, or you can generate what will be, and we want to be generating something very different than just sort of articulating the past.
Amazing, Clay. And when we speak about business, Clay, the first thing that business leaders, when we meet, the first thing that comes to mind is business competition and the competitiveness. And so
Mm-hmm.
there are three things I wanted to talk about, especially. One, uh, what was your understanding of selling, competition, and I actually wrote something. Yeah, conflict. How do you
Mm-hmm.
how does your being or your being centered leadership help you put these three things: competition, conflict, and selling? Because you
Yeah.
know at the end of the day, these are three things most of the time that you're doing as a leader in business. So how does that help?
Yeah, I think that, we were effectively we sold effectively before I started working with Steve, but I think what being centered leadership did is it helped me come from a more service oriented place when we sell. And I think just, you hear all the time selling is serving, but I don't think a lot of people really understand that and practice it. And when you come from who you're being in the world, if if I mean, I suppose you can come from a place of being a shady salesperson, but most of the time when people are very intentional about who they're being, they're wanting to show up for the world in a great way. They're wanting to serve. And so then that servant heart becomes very powerful in a sales context where we're just trying to serve and help the people that we sell our product to or our service to. So I think the best way I could summarize how being centered leadership affects our sales, it helps us come from a very servant heart, a servant oriented approach. In terms of competition, I think that a lot of times competition brings with it fears and comparisons and all kinds of stuff that's not doesn't serve us well and in how we show up for the world. And so, we've always just taken the approach, and I think our being centered leadership is related to this. We just take the approach of just focus on who we are. Let's do what we do best and differentiate. I think differentiation is a much better, more productive way to approach the market than competition. Because when you use differentiation, you're starting with who we are. You're saying this is who we are. This is how we show up for the world. This is how we serve. And it might be different than competitor X or Y, but we're not going to waste a bunch of time talking about competitor X and Y. We're just going to focus on who we are, how that's different, and why that's going to benefit our customers. And that's really the approach that we've tried to take. And then in terms of conflict, I think that's probably where there's the most interplay between being centered leadership and one of these principles, in this case, conflict. I think that every interaction with human beings creates an opportunity for us to practice who we're being. And every individual has the way they're showing up, and we have, you have your way of showing up, and there's going to be conflict in that. It just happens. That's the nature of human beings. And so when I think about conflict, it's really, I learned a long time ago that conflict is a mirror, and it's reflecting back the person that we're in conflict with is reflecting back to us something that we have an opportunity to work on if we choose to. And most of us choose not to do it, to be totally honest. Most of us, we get into a conflict, we blame the other person, we judge their view as wrong and our view is right. And if only they would see things the right way, then there wouldn't be any conflict. Well, that's just not reality. That's not the way it's going to be. And so if we consider who we're really trying to be for the world, we're going to be much more open to others' views. And most of all, a conflict will awaken in us an opportunity to reflect, learn, measure our behavior against the ideal that we are intending to be for the world. And usually a conflict is going to reveal something that we get to work on that helps us be more in integrity with who we're being for the world.
Clate, both of us are from the world of automation. And, you know, at some point people talk about like automation is taking away many things from us. And,
Mm-hmm.
there is a lot of fear that's going on, and it takes a lot of effort to convince people about the benefits of automation. And then
Yes.
people talk about how we are distancing the people uh, with the usage of technology. So
Right.
how do you see that, and when exactly uh, did you uh, conceive this idea of this software, and
Yeah.
how did you take it forward, keeping intact your business being centered, CEO?
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that some people are afraid of automation, and I can see why. Especially in small business, it's about personal touch. And the concern is that, well, if I automate this, it's not going to feel personal, and I won't stand out in my relationship with my customers because it feels so impersonal. And I think that's one aspect of the fear of automation. I think another aspect is just the unknown. It feels kind of you know uncertain. It's a lot of people have, just like some people have a mental block around doing math, some people have a mental block around automation. They just, oh no, that's scary, I don't want to touch that. And so to the first point, I would say automation actually makes it possible for you to scale your personal touch. It makes it possible for you to be personal with more people. And when done right, you can have it be even more personal than if you were actually one by one sending those communications to customers. So what I mean by that is you can set up the automation so that as your customer interacts with you, clicks on links, opens emails, responds to texts, looks at web pages, that sort of thing, you can actually respond and serve them with just what they're looking for. And so it can, to my first point, or to the first point, my response is actually you can be very personal about it. And then the benefit is, what could be more personal for you than to be able to be with your family and have time to do the things that you want to do, because you're enabling technology to handle the personalized follow-up that you need to do with your customers. By the way, follow-up is the whole key to this. That's what drives success in business, is following up effectively with customers. The more you follow up, the more you're going to build relationships and sell. The less you follow up, the less you'll sell, the less you grow. So follow up is the key, but people don't have time to do it. And therefore, putting that on autopilot in a very personalized way enables small businesses to not only have the personal touch for their customers, but to have the personal touch for their families and their friends and the people closest to them. The second point is for people that have a mental block around automation. They're just afraid of what it could do, if this robot goes haywire or whatever. The reality is that when you work with the right partner, you have a guiding hand to help you and to show you the way. And if you just go get technology, yeah, it might run out of control on you. But when you work with a technology partner that understands the personal side, they can steer you in the right ways, help you to be very effective, help solve problems when something goes awry. And there's no reason to be afraid of technology because you're not alone. So we say all the time, success requires more than just the technology. It requires the software plus the strategy of how to do it, plus the support every step of the way to make sure that you are accomplishing your goals and serving your customers the way you want to.
Fantastic, Clate. Clate, since we are talking about the personal touch, I would love to listen about uh, how your work has impacted your personal life.
Yeah. Well, I think the work on who I'm being has changed my personal life more than it's changed my business life. It's changed both for sure, but it's had a dramatic impact on who I am for my family and my friends and those close to me. But in particular, my wife, my kids, my grandkids. And the way I would say it is, when I started working with Steve, I asked him because I couldn't imagine spending so much money on coaching. I was just like, I just couldn't imagine. I was like that, I've never spent that much on anything except for a house. Why would I spend that kind of money on coaching? And I said, pardon the blunt question, but what would I get for that? And he said, well, let me tell you what you would get. You would get to see Clate Mask the way the world sees Clate Mask, and you would get to decide if you want to make adjustments to that. And you'd become very conscious to who you are for the world. And, when he said those words, I didn't really understand it because I hadn't really begun working on it. And so who I am for the world, that phrase, it was foreign to me. It was almost like he was speaking a foreign language. And when he would talk about who I'm being, it was like, I don't get that. I don't know what you're talking about. But pretty quickly, he helped me see how other people experience me, and that it wasn't exactly what I thought it was in my mind. And I started to recognize, oh, there's some ways where I would rather not have the world experience me that way. And there's some things I do and some ways I operate that, if you are closest to me, might be pretty unpleasant. And so I started to dig into that, and that became a deep, intense study of myself and how I show up and my behaviors and how that affects my wife and my kids and then ultimately, of course, coworkers and my team members and all of that. But it has definitely had an impact on me personally. So it's definitely had an impact on me personally, and there's a lot to that.
Uh, so, Clint, when you have shifts on the personal side and you being a business leader, and as business leaders, we talk about organizational culture and growth mindset and everything. But in
Yeah.
reality, leaders find it very difficult to install this culture of growth mindset and a culture of innate sense of well-being, and that comes from knowing who you are being in the moment.
Yeah.
and establishing a culture of coaching. Everybody helps everybody else grow and understand where they show up and how they show up and where they come from. So, how did you help your business or your workplace have this culture, and what was the impact?
Oh man, there's a lot to that. We were long before I started working with Steve, we were very intentional about the culture that we create at KEAP. I had the good fortune of working in a software company when I was in graduate school and seeing a culture that was a really, really great to be a part of. And it was a very interesting thing because as I showed up to work at that organization, at that company, I I wanted to be better. I wanted to learn. I wanted to grow. I wanted to be a part of this thing that was happening. And I didn't really understand how it got created in that business. I just knew that it was something that I wanted to create when we started our company. So with my co-founders from the very beginning, we talked about creating a really fun, vibrant, energetic culture. And because we had an intention to do that, we studied, we learned, we looked at different ways of how to do that and what how we should intentionally work together to create that. We read everything we could from Jim Collins and from Marcus Buckingham around people, and we read everything we could about leading people in an inspiring and motivational way, and we and it naturally brought us into a lot of the personal development world and just how we can help our become our best selves and work with others who want to become their best selves. And so we were very intentional around that, and we got to a point where we decided we need to articulate our purpose, our values, and our mission. And this is a lot, Jim Collins teaches a lot of this stuff. And then we need to be very intentional about hiring to that purpose, values, and mission, and training and leading people in accordance with that purpose, values, and mission, and then firing people in accordance to that purpose, values, and mission. When people don't fit, they if they don't fit the purpose, values, and mission, they need to go. That's just all there is to it. If they won't make changes. Now, nobody's perfect. I'm not a perfect fit with our purpose, values, mission, but I practice it every day and I work on it every day. And if our people are doing that, then it becomes an amazing place to be a part of, because everybody's working to become a better version of themselves, and everybody's in a growth mindset. And when you have people who aren't in that, they stick out like a sore thumb, and you coach them up and get them to become a part of that, or you help them understand that there's nothing wrong with them. They're not a fit for what we're trying to do. And so they need to go find a place where they fit better. And that's just intentional work we do all the time, hiring, coaching, and firing to the purpose, values, and mission. And it comes back to who we're being as a company. As a company, we are being our purpose. We liberate and empower entrepreneurs to strengthen families, communities, and economies. That's our purpose. That's why we do what we do. We liberate them from the grips of small business chaos with automation, and that empowers them to make an amazing impact in their business, on their families, their communities, and in fact, entire economies, because the strength of economies are growing small businesses. By the way, I'm going to say that again. It's not small businesses. That's not the strength of the economy. It's growing small businesses. That's what a strong economy is all about. And so the purpose that we have is to liberate and empower entrepreneurs to strengthen families, communities, and economies. And our mission is to simplify growth for 1 million entrepreneurs worldwide by 2030. And our values, we have 7 values, and we live by these values. We genuinely care. We learn always. We own it. We build trust. We dream big. We check ego. We win together. And each of those has a paragraph about what that means. So we live our purpose and our values and our mission. We hire people that fit that. We coach all of our people to be that way, and we let people go when they don't come around to the coaching. And so inherent in all of that, of who we're being as a company, is that if you think about the values I just said, we genuinely care, we learn always, we own it, meaning we take responsibility for our actions. Well, those right there are enough to say we're deep into personal development and learning all the time and getting better. We take accountability and responsibility for our mistakes and our areas we need to improve. We build trust. We're the first to extend trust. We lean into trust. And so our values just create an environment where people are working on becoming better, and that creates a really amazing culture when it's grounded in our purpose and our mission.
Beautiful, Clate. Long back when I was thinking of my purpose, uh, and I worked on it, I found or discovered that my purpose is accelerating inner autonomy. And
Cool.
the values that I chose for that were authenticity, service, and love. And
Mm.
that's what I used to see whether I show up with authenticity, whether I show up to serve, and whether I show up from love. Yes, we are human beings. We fall sometimes, but then that's what those values are what help us get back again. But I found that you come across even in Jim Collins, as you said in his work, he came across different kinds of leaders and different kinds of cultures. So there are two kinds of organizations which exist, with the leadership. Some believe, in their purpose, in their mission, in their values, and they say that once this is set right, everything else falls into place and everything goes good. And then there's a new set of leaders. They look at purpose and vision and values as fanciful things. As you know
Mm-hmm.
kind of nice to have, but doesn't matter. But because money is what matters, ROI is what matters, profits is what matters, sense of urgency is what matters. And how do you see these two sides, of business leadership? One driven by purpose, mission, and values, and one who talk about being practical in business world and talking about what's important to get done because of the speed at which changes are happening in the industrial world.
Yes. My answer is that there's value and importance to both things. If I had to choose one, I would choose a purpose-built, mission-driven company, because I would rather work with people that are aligned to our why and our what than work with a group of mercenaries who are getting a paycheck. I've just found that the first one, in a purpose-built, mission-driven company, there's a fulfillment and a satisfaction about what we do every day that is not found in a transactional, practical, we all have a job, we got a paycheck, this is what we do. Now, having said that, there are times where I can look at our business and I see that we were heavy on purpose and mission, and we were light on the strategy and the practical activities that we needed to do every day to be successful. And so you truthfully must marry them. You have to have the purpose, values, mission, but it has to have a good, strong strategy and operating mechanism to it. And so when people sometimes say, hey, we got work to do, we need to just execute and get this stuff done, they're not wrong. They just need to also create some space for how that plugs into the bigger picture of our purpose and our mission and our values. And what I've found is sometimes those practical thinkers can become frustrated with the philosophical thinkers who are working on the purpose and the mission, because it doesn't feel like there's enough connection between the two. So now there are some people who just roll their eyes entirely and dismiss the purpose and the mission and the values. And to them, I would say they're missing it. They're missing the big picture. They're they're running like crazy, and maybe they're accomplishing some really good things in terms of profits and revenue and growth even, but they're missing why. Well, why are we doing this? If the why is because we want to make money, I would say we're missing the big picture. And some people get caught up in the why are we doing it? Because we're making money. Okay, well, that's fine, but that's gonna run out at some point. That's gonna get old at some point. And what I've found in running this business for 20 years is it's the passion of our purpose that gets you through hard times, recessions, uh, competitive challenges, uh, legal threats, you name it. There's hard stuff that comes that challenges the motivation of we're doing this for money. And if you don't have a deeper purpose and mission and reason for doing what you do, when the hard times come, the profit seekers, the people that are just doing it for money, they get worn down. They don't want to keep doing it. It's too hard.
Beautiful. Clate, how has this impacted your employees? How do they feel, in this long journey? Many of them might have traveled with you for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, we have some people that have been with us for, 15 plus years, and they have a vision and an understanding of what we're doing to empower entrepreneurs and enable them to find the freedom they were looking for in the first place when they started their business. And there's a lot of passion behind that. And then we have people who just started last month and they're learning and soaking this up. It takes a while to really understand it and appreciate what it is that we do. You don't just get it right away. So it's a matter of just teaching it, reinforcing it at every turn, making sure that the leadership team is practicing it and modeling it and sharing it with others. That's really what it comes down to. When you get the leadership team all aligned to the purpose, values, mission, and strategy, then you can execute it by hiring, coaching, firing to purpose, values, and mission.
Amazing. Uh, Clate, I heard you speak about being your word. I would love to listen once again for our audience. It seems like very difficult in the world of business when you're talking business and when there is a lot at stake. And when you talk about being your word, it's like completely impossible to be your word always as a business leader. So and to install a culture of being your word in your organization. So how I would love to listen from you. How's been your experience with the understanding of being your word and execution of this?
It is the practice of being my word. When people take that on, there's a lot to it. We don't realize um, how much inflation there is in our word, as Steve puts it. We don't realize how common it is for us to say we'll do something and then not do it in very simple ways, little things. But our mind takes note of everything that we say and is silently calculating whether or not our bodies are following suit, and therefore how likely is it that next time we say something we do it. So this might seem kind of strange for people, but if your friend says, hey, I'm going to be moving next week, and a bunch of people are going to come over and help, it'd be great if you could come. And you say, oh, okay, I'll try to do that. But in your mind, you have a really busy weekend. It's not likely you're going to be able to go. And you don't tell him that. Then what happens is your mind takes note that you said you were going to try to go. even though you really didn't have much intention of showing up. And that might seem like a small thing, but when those things add up, it has a toll on the mind. And in particular, it takes a toll on that human being's ability to create outcomes. And this is the thing that Steve taught me that I now understand very well, that I did not understand when I started working with him. We are creators. I knew that. What I didn't quite understand is we create with our mouth. We create by first speaking it. And sometimes you'll hear people say, I'm going to speak this into existence. And then they start to take actions consistent with what they've spoken until that thing becomes a reality. Well, let's put this into practical terms. Let's say that you're a business owner and you say, next year, we're going to grow 30%. Well, if you declare that and that's your intent, but your practices every day, your habits every day are such that you speak little things like telling your friend you'll try to show up to help him move, but you don't do it, or telling your child, oh yeah, we'll go get that for you this weekend. I know you really want that. And then you forget and it doesn't happen. Or telling your wife, I'm going to go pick this up from the store, and you go to the store and you get two things, but you don't get the one that you said you were going to get. Anytime there is a misalignment between what you say and what you do, whether it's because you forget, because you were unintentional, because you were telling a little white lie and you really didn't want to say the truth because the truth might be too uncomfortable for your friend to hear, whatever that is, when your mouth, which is the creator of your future, says something that doesn't match up with what you do, you are reducing your ability to grow 30% next year. And I did not understand that before I started working with Steve. And I can tell you after 13 years, it is absolutely true. We can only create what our mind believes will happen when we speak it. And our mind doesn't believe what we speak if it's common that we speak something that does not come to pass. And so whether it doesn't happen because we forget, or because we didn't have intention, or because we didn't want to tell the truth, or because we deprioritize it, I'm going to lose 10 pounds next year. And then we don't do it. Well, guess what? That erodes our ability to grow 30%. I'm going to mow the lawn on Saturday, and then it rains or the weather is not good and we don't do it. And there might be a perfectly good reason, but when we don't do what we said we were going to do, when we're not our word, we reduce the power that we have to create the outcomes that we want in life. And that is when you get to that, you go, oh, wow, okay, I need to really work on being my word. And then you find it's very difficult to be our word in every situation. And so then you need to live by agreements. And if you say you're going to do something and it's not going to happen, then you clean it up as quickly as possible. Hey, I thought I was going to be there at 6:00. There's a bad accident and it looks like I'm going to be 10 minutes late. I'm calling the person right now to explain, here's what happened. Can we agree to meet at 6:10 instead of 6:00? Most people just say, oh, I'll just show up at 6:10 and then say, hey, sorry, there was a bad accident. But when we do that, there's an integrity gap from the moment we see that there's an accident to the moment that we show up. And sometimes the integrity gap continues because we just ignore the 10 minutes late like it's no big deal. And our mind takes note of that. Oh, I noticed that Clate is 10 minutes late and didn't do what he said he was going to do and didn't seem to care about it. Well, guess what? When I tell my company we're going to grow 30%, my mind is saying, yeah, we'll see about that. I'm not so sure because I've seen all the ways that Clate's not being his word. So being our word is everything. It comes down to our ability. I mean, it determines our ability to create. It determines people's ability to trust us. It determines our own ability to trust ourselves. It determines, in many cases, our esteem of ourselves. And then you get into the real game of how do you deal with it when you're not being your word? And do you beat yourself up over that? And do you forgive yourself and all kinds of stuff? So there's a very rigid way to be our word, and there's a very elegant, beautiful way to be our word. And I'm working on being my word and working on doing it beautifully and elegantly. And I am positive I will go to the grave working on this challenge.
So powerful. And uh, we take it easy when it's let's say we take it easy when it's a 5 minute delay. But when somebody is 1 hour late, you say you were 1 hour late. I was just 5 minutes late. So my 5 minutes
Yes,
is very less to compare to your 1 hour late, and you're getting
that's
late.
right.
But if I miss for 5 minutes, I say it's just 5 minutes, and I can say I'm sorry for that. And yes,
That's what Steve calls we traffic in excuses. And we and not only that, what we do is not only do we compare our excuses where we're not our word, but we let ourselves off the hook and we let others off the hook. Oh, since I was 5 minutes late, now I don't mind in the next meeting when somebody's 5 minutes late. It kind of makes me feel better about myself that I was 5 minutes late, instead of standing for my word and standing for that person's word and helping them to be on time the next time.
exactly. And then the other form, like taking shelter in authority, like I am the boss, so I have the I have the permission to do that. But if it's a subordinate, he needs to be more committed to do that
Right.
in various formats. But I
When the
think
reality is just the opposite. The more senior you are as the leader, the greater responsibility you have to be your word.
exactly, yes, and that's probably the beginning of setting a culture, establishing a culture, and being somebody who people would like to, employees would like to emulate and respect and aspire to create.
That's right.
Clay,
And every
yeah,
leader who's honest will say they're working at it. I'm working at it. Just
yes,
because that's I said at the beginning, I said I must be a slow learner because it's been 13 years and I'm still working at it. And I definitely am excited and grateful for the progress I've made and the person I was 13 years ago. But I think, wow, I've got so much more work to do to be the kind of leader and the kind of person that I want to be and show up that way every day.
absolutely. Clay, Clay, I would like you to speak for, kind of like a brief summary of your long journey. How has that changed over a period of time from where you began to where you are now? How is this entire journey, like if you can categorize the first 4 or 5 years, this was how it was. Now this is how I see. If you can give us a glimpse of that.
Yeah. When I first started working with Steve, my ambition and intensity were very powerful, but also very dangerous because I would get blinders on and I would just charge forward. And if people got in the way, they might get run over. And if um, if I didn't slow down a little bit, I didn't notice and recognize some implications and wasn't taking in all of the things that I needed to. I was not, I had no concept of what it was to be gentle. I had no appreciation for what it was to be slow. I thought slow was bad. I thought gentle was bad. And I was 90 miles an hour, go as fast as I can all the time. And that wears people out and it hurts people, especially my wife and kids. The reason I started working with Steve is I didn't want to hurt people. I wanted to I wanted to maintain the effective sides of my ambition and intensity, but I wanted to become better interpersonally and become a more um, enjoyable and gracious person to be around. And I didn't really understand it, but I've come to understand what it is to be gentle and what it is to be present with the people that I'm with, and to be humble and check my ego in a way which I had always talked about checking ego, but there's the very visible side of ego that shows up as arrogance, but there's a more insidious side of ego that shows up as fear, and then it turns into all kinds of challenges. And I had a lot of fear-based ego that was causing problems. And so learning to just face that and own it and become truly humble, that's the journey that I've been on, to be gentle and present and humble, and to still be ambitious and still have a focus and an intensity on greatness, but doing it in a more gracious way, a more magnanimous way, a way that enables people to be more a part of that. That's the journey I've been on. And, I'm probably 10% of the way there. I got a lot of work to do, but I love the work I've done. And, I think my wife and kids would say that they appreciate the work I've done, and I'm making progress.
Lovely. Clate, two things. Okay, let me start with first. How do you, okay, what would you say to the leaders who are yet to understand the power of being coached by someone and the investment
Yeah.
into coaching? What would you tell them?
Yeah. Number one, I would say you need someone to talk to that doesn't have an agenda, that doesn't have an interest in your business outcome, your financial, personal outcome, whatever. You need someone who really has that interest in you, that you can be free and open to talk to, because you're carrying things as a leader that aren't meant to be carried alone. You need to talk to someone. Um, the second thing I would say is, when you start to really study yourself, and it's much more than just self-awareness. It's a combination of self-awareness and a person who's working with you and challenging you. The way that a athletics coach challenges a person to achieve their goals on the field or the court, or the in the playing environment, a leadership coach challenges you to achieve those goals on in the business world and in your personal life. And you need someone to push you and challenge you. And just like, if you're a leader and you're like, well, I think I'm doing just fine. Well, you're take whatever sport of choice you have. You probably are doing just fine. But imagine having a coach right next to you, and in each moment talking with you and helping you identify how you could do things a little differently. That's what a business coach can do for a leader. So, I can't recommend it enough, especially if a person is feeling stuck, or if they're feeling like they're struggling to balance personal life and business life, if they feel like their personal relationships that matter the most to them, or that mattered the most to them before they became a leader. Because I'll share a little zinger here. If the relationships that mattered to you the most before you became a leader are starting to not matter to you as much, that is your ego.
Yes,
That is your ego.
yes,
And so you have to, if you might not even be noticing it because those relationships aren't mattering as much to you as they once did, because you're now prioritizing success and accomplishment and achievement and recognition and all those things. That's ego. And that's a dangerous place for your relationships to be in. So if you're struggling for balance, if you're struggling for results in business the way that you want, if you're struggling with your relationships, or you're feeling like they're not as rich as you'd like them to be, all of those are indicators that a coach could serve you well. Now, you need the right coach. You need to go find someone that you work with. And the right coach isn't someone who has certain credentials. The right coach is a person who you can open up to and who can push you, be honest with you, help you see the things you need to work on, and motivate you to work on those things and hold you accountable to to do those things. That's what you need in a coach, not necessarily the world's greatest coach in this or that, or the most expensive this or that. No, it's a coach who understands how to push you and help you, and that you feel that you can open up to and not hold back.
Perfect. My last question, Clate, it was a beautiful conversation. And since both of us come from the world of automation and business, I would like to know your prediction for this world of automation and how relevant you see being centered leadership still in the future. How would you opine about that?
Yeah, I would say that both automation and being centered leadership will continue to grow in significance and widespread acceptance. In some ways, the two things are on a very similar course. There is a small subset of the population that can benefit from both, that has begun to understand them. And the more they understand them, the more they lean into it. And the more they lean into it, the more others say, oh, what is that you've got going on? Oh, it's this being centered leadership. Oh, it's automation that's driving the growth of our company. And when those two things those two things have a parallel course, but they can also come together in a really beautiful way when you're very intentional about what you're trying to create for your, to help you be and show up and be your word for your customers in a way that is difficult to do without automation helping you. So I see both of them as being the future, and I see people practicing them in their own ways, and I think it's a fairly small minority of the business world that sees it and understands it, particularly in small business. In bigger business, you have high-powered coaches that have gone in and taught some of this stuff, and both in terms of the being centered leadership, and then you have high-powered and expensive automation solutions that have been put in place in big business. But it's coming down to small business, and it will happen because entrepreneurs are, they're pushing forward and advancing, and they are adopting both of these practices.
Well, thank you so much, Clate. It was an honor to have you on my show, Moments with Masters. And thank you so much for accepting my invitation to speak to our audience at the Mumbai The Ultimate Experience 25th of February 2023 virtually. And we would love to listen from you again and again and again. And I'm sure last 13 years and the next 13 years, we are going to have much more to listen from you and much more to learn from your experiences of being your word. Love this conversation.
Well, thank you. Great to be with you. It's been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much, Clate. Thank you so much. Namaste. Namaste from India.
Sounds great. Thank you, Ranjan. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.